My name is Elif Hant. I'm from Mimar Sinan Fine Arts University in Istanbul. This project actually is part of my master thesis, and I want to share a little bit from it. And I called it Architecture Around Matter, drawing a plan as poetic performance. I can change. Thank you. I'm sorry for the writings, but I'm a little bit excited, so that's why I have to write it. So when I think of the poetics of performance and the practice of drawing, the first thing is what is performativity actually? For the first time in the 20th century, the act of performing, which means to perform, realized stage, was described as performativity or performativeness by the philosopher of language, John Austin. According to Austin, in a performative act, something doesn't have to happen in order to be, and uttering can also be performative. And he compares the performative and the static utterance. The performative does something instead of just saying something. The performative is wrong or right, rather happy or unhappy. In this sense, according to Austin, the performative in language is to describe and convey takes action instead. We can discovery of the performativity in art is also important. After the 70s, traditional performative arts such as music, theater, dance, or arts such as painting, sculpture, and poetry also leave their origins by undergoing serious transformations towards various forms of performance. We can change. And what is poetics of performance? The poetics of the performance characterizes the relationality between the ways of doing and the act of doing. Not to redefine these connection paths, but to reproduce them together with the performative potential of drawing practice. It is important to think about architecture. It is in this context, my drawing practice questions architecture by trying to understand the relation between today's perception of performance and line. Peter Brook emphasizes that in every act, every situation allows meaning to be recreated and produces multiplicity of meaning. Just as there is no direct objective relationship between the representer and the represented, the relationship between the perceiver and the perceived is not a singular passive but a multiple active process. So construction or social construction of reality takes place on the ground of the multiplicity produces by the performative or execution practice, etc. And we can change. And in this line, the performativity and the line is important. Art critic and historiographer Catherine Bezeger states that artists and linguists alike believe in the power of art creation as the creation of the world, of naming for linguists as an act of consciousness that leads us to know through new perception and influence society, says that he shares. We can change. So we see the Sol-Levitt paintings, line, and performative painting, maybe we can say. Line, what about the line and architecture? According to architect and theorist Marco Frascari, who defines architecture as an interface to the actions of writing, drawing lines, and building, architectural lines are the material, spatial, cultural, and temporal formations of refined, multiple sensory and emotional understanding of architecture. Architectural lines create graphics, a sequence of actions based on the facts that architects make representation of future and past architecture. Architectural drawings should be understood not as visualization of the building, but as basic architectural facts. The concept of lineamenta, which Albert mentioned in this book, an architecture book, written in the 15th century, has the idea of being embedded in itself, because Alberti's conception of lineamenta derives from the use of track lines, ropes, ribbons, wires, or threads, mostly made with flax fibers and used by builders um, during building construction. With this reference to the materiality of the line, Frascari says that the line, which defines everything from the tectonic movements of the building to the details, offers a research environment that causes symbiotic relationship between material and the culture. We can change. So, architect and theorist Stan Allen, who offers a deeper conceptualization of the similar understanding, says that there is no fixed understanding of theory or a fixed understanding of practice. There are only practices, writing practices, actions that are primarily critical, discursive, or interpretive, and material practices, activities, and transform reality by producing new objects for new material organizations. Allen, instead of seeing architecture as an object or project, he says that it is necessary to see it as performance or process, that is practice. So according to Allen, architecture is not discursive practice, it is material practice with actions such as drawing, writing, building, and teaching. We can change. Um, so I, I take the poetics in the extended field, and Barrett Watson, who reflects on poetics, language-centered poetry and criticism in the expanded field, which allows me to look at the tension between the architectural design and the research from an interdisciplinary field, tries to overcome the meaning boundaries of the concept. As mentioned, with reference to the expanded field's understanding of poetics, which is neither poetry nor language. This is a series where I researched the possibility of interdisciplinary production. According to Watson, poetics is the reflexivity of producing the work or cultural products, but not only in an explanatory or positive sense. As a form of reflection in and on practice, the poetic questions the nature and value of the art structure while broadening the ground of its production in the context of art production and acceptance. Thus, the expanding poetic field leads to the production of art in new genres as a moment of reflexivity within the practice that creates grounds for new meanings. We can change. So, there's a question that I have to ask. What kind of a relationship can be established between poetics and architectural representation in the extended field? Can we say that architectural practice in the form of architectural design, representation, and criticism expands its field for production in the context of its relationship with poetics? How can one go beyond being descriptive and interpretive for new production forms in architectural drawing? Or how can plan drawing as an architectural practice make room for itself between or beyond the fixed positions of form, genre, discipline, and as a result, cultural meaning? For this reason, in what context can I examine poetic productions beyond aesthetic theory? We can change. So when I go back to plan drawing, and when I consider the plan drawing as a poetic performance, what kind of architectural knowledge can plan drawing mediate to produce? How is plan drawing one of the abstract tools of architecture related to poetics and performance? Is the plan performative act? Or when the plan drawing is considered together with poetic productions, can it expand its performative field? Or to investigate the plan drawing as poetic performance, can it also mediate to produce criticism about architecture? there's a lot of question, so we can change. Um, Maybe I can we can pass this thing because I don't know how many times we can change it. Maybe I can just read this part of the previous um, presentation, saying that the plan is a name and an action. Stan Allen says that the conceptual power of the plan as a working tool lies in its working simultaneously as an analytical and projective tool that accumulates between past histories and future possibilities. It functions with abstract means of patterns, spacing, and measure to encode information, but it is also a display of social relations. It is impossible to experience the everyday social, political, or cultural reality of a Louis Fontaine, but we understand what it means as a kind of bodily insight, not intellectually, he said. Um, so maybe one before, sorry, we can go back just one slide. Thank you. Yeah. Noting that the distance between drawing and building has always been opaque, and WAG architectural historian Alberto Perez Gomez says that most of the confusion faced by contemporary architects and educators is linked to a misunderstanding of drawing as a means of reduction. According to Gomez, the belief that drawing is simply the reduction of a building has developed since the Renaissance, when architecture was perceived as an activity of the mind and accepted as a liberal art, with the idea that it resembled mathematics and geometry. In the 18th century, Durand, as a first person to advocate the descriptive methods of geometry in architectural design, rejects the symbolic order in traditional understanding of architecture and excludes myth and metaphysical concerns from architectural theory. While architecture transforms into a formal combination of facilitation due to the composition mechanism, design remains essentially just logic that is devoid of absolute meaning and turns into a syntax. And according to Gomez, we can go further. Okay, so maybe I can change this one, and yes. So in this section, actually, where I try to produce the politics and poetics of plan drawing, the dialogical and creative process established with the throughout of drawing as poetics and poetic performance in the expanded area that I tried to explain in the previous section is laid out. The relationship between poetics and architectural design is investigated within the scope of the study. It develops from the productive thinking of the plan drawing, which is defined as architectural design and representation. So I asked we can change the, yes, okay. These are the drawings, plan drawings, the writings, and some of the texture, texture of the houses, my houses. I ask that while the plan drawing is produced with a focus on the future in the architectural design process, how is the plan of the house we live in produced? And how does a house recalled from memory appear in the plan drawing? How does the plan become a house in the text or the drawing as a performance? And last question, how does the memory of the body performing daily life become the plan? So maybe we can change one more. In this drawings, it seems simply a plan, but actually I draw with the imaginary walking in the houses. I just I recall the memory and with the everyday life objects and the talkings, traces in all things in the houses. So I recall from the memory and I draw them. Um, Maybe I researched the act of drawing the plan as an objective form of representation in this part where I think about 5 different houses built at different times in Istanbul and located in different urban textures. The reflection processes on work also develops after I have stayed in these houses at different times in the last 5 years and have had the opportunity to experience it directly. Since the architect of most of these houses is unknown, it is difficult to measure the intention of approaching the house. But the important thing here is the possibility that life doesn't quite agree with the foresight of the architect. Situations where the use of the house changes, transforms, stratifies, decomposes, gathers, disperses in daily life, it opens up a personal, intellectual space for the act of planning. With planned drawings that mediate rethinking space planning with other parameters given by everyday actions, personal obsessions, or housemates, while creating a historical topography of Istanbul, a personal historical narrative is also established, you can say. This narrative is based on the act of drawing, writing by remembering the house I live in. The narrative, which is built on the act of drawing, writing by remembering the houses I live in, is considered together with the act of remembering. Thus, while the plan appears as an interval in which the act of drawing and the act of writing are interchanged, the metaphorical, analogical, or allegorical layers performed on the flatness of the page apply the place as narrative. This section I called the walking and remembering. The plans drawn by remembering began with an imaginative walk through the house, which is part of the past experience. This imaginative walk enables remembering by revealing the visual, tactile, and sensory interactions of the body with the space. Settling in the house, settling or not settling of things, daily routines, inside the house, daily events from outside the house, the dimensions of the items, the narratives of the items, the locations of the rooms, the fact um, that the rooms of the house are shared by the residents, the effects of this sharing on daily practices, blah blah. Various tools that enable the establishment of memories, such as the position of the body, how the body exists in space, are revealed during this walk and are performed through lines or tags. We can change. Okay, just last part. We can change, and these are the plan drawings and the just walking and remembering text. We can change them. Yes, these are the details of the text, and we can change. Yes, and last part. This part is touching and telling part. In this section, where space draws itself, a narrative about the spatiality of the house organized by plan is established by taking texture samples that carry the traces of life through the walls, floors, doors, corridors, and thresholds, which are the parts of the house I live in. In this wall drawings, floor drawings, and material drawings, there is a three section in that drawings. While the memory of matter is performed as a piece of wood, wall plastic, or floor covering with the act of weaving, the memory of the house is also performed together with the narrative, with the repetition of these woven traces through the narrative, the changes that the house undergoes over time, the actions of the occupants of the space, the relationship between material and human actions, or the relationship of material with time are performed as poetic performance. Just let me sum it up in a few sentences and then close it. By discussing the possibility of plan drawing as an architectural representation tool with the concepts of poetics and performance, the study tries to offer something beyond interpretive to indicate the instrumental role of architecture. In this sense, these relational relationships established on drawing a plan from an interdisciplinary field, it can provide a poetic diffusion between both discursive and material practices. I guess it's the last one, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Elif. I'm just curious because we kind of sped through the last few the last few slides, and it may not have been quite clear to me, but the spaces that you draw, because you have in your abstract you were discussing memory of these places, and how there's an overlap of different times where you try to draw them from memory. And with these rubbings, these are spaces that you are living in. Do you draw them when you live in them, or these are drawn from memory after a few years of?
I understand the last question. Is it
do you live where you draw, or do you draw them after you've moved?
Actually, for example, this one, the material ones, when I live in that, I just, you know, I take the texture of that. These are where I live in. But the other 4 houses, yes, these are, these ones are from memory, just memory. How could I, it is, sometimes I made a mistake, but I put that mistake in the drawing. I didn't erase it because when I look at it, I remember what I think, and maybe you can when you can look at these drawings a little bit while, you can trace it, because I forget some objects or some bed, some chair or something. So that's why when I remember it, it expands the house's limits. So.
Okay, so I think. I think there's a question in the chat by Carole, if you want to.
Okay.
Sure, I can.
Merci, Carole.
I can ask you. I can read it for you. So you started your presentation showing us Rosanne Krauss's diagram, and so it made me think about her diagram. If we had a category, let's say drawing, and a second category that would be a not drawing, like she does with sculpture, for example, what would be a not drawing, or what is between a drawing and a not drawing? Is it performance, the enactment of a drawing? With something like the performances that we saw earlier with Isabelle's work be an in-between? How can we enact a plan? Isn't the plan perhaps too anchored in practice and discipline to be a not drawing? It's an impossible question to answer.
Thank you, Carol.
It just made me think.
Yeah. It is actually, the thing is the performativity, I think, because when we think of the performative arts, or we can expand the art, we can expand the architecture from it. So we can say the drawing, it could be a dance, it could be a just models, it could be everything, So we can say the drawing could be anything, and of course it's hard to think in the architectural discourse. How could we say this is a plan drawing when it doesn't happen, but it's just a practice what I'm doing with these plans. The texts are plan drawing too for me, and the other textures are the plan drawings too for me. But in the context of this thesis, you know.
Great, thank you, Elif. We have to move on, but thank you for joining us today. Well, you can stay with us. We're still not done. But thank you very much for your presentation and for making it work.